If you're like most producers, you want to get a loud mix, but you're not sure how. In this two-part video series, I'm going to look into two plugins that could transform the dynamic range in your mix. First, we'll start with the Glue Compressor. Let's get to it.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah?
I think there's something we need to talk about. Some people were a bit confused about what you said about Glue Compressor last time.
Okay. Who are you?
My name Mac. Tacky Mac.
Oh.
Just like I say down there.
Alright. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too. What they call you, BigJerr?
Yeah, they call me BigJerr. Tacky Mac, what do you want?
Well, like I said, I think some people last time were a little confused about what you said about Glue Compressor. They thought that you just get that color you're talking about simply by running it through the device.
Huh. Well, that's weird. Tacky Mac, I don't think I ever said
Well,
that.
you gotta be extra clear. It's my job to make sure your videos are 100%.
Wow, that's really nice of you, Mac. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a nice guy. My job.
All right.
Anyway, I think you should let them know that soft clip need to be hit before you get that color. All right? I want you to be the best YouTube video guy you can be.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, all right. Timber.
All right.
Yeah, see ya.
Timber. Well, there you have it, guys. That was Mac. And apparently I want to clarify something about the Glue Compressor from last week. So let's get to it. So before we get started, Mac made an interesting point. I wanted to clarify that simply running sound through a Glue Compressor doesn't give it the color until we run it into the soft clip. Now, the difference between the Glue Compressor and a regular compressor is there is no option to get that color in a regular compressor. So again, with the Glue Compressor, you get the traditional glue compression by running it through, the same attack, release, compression settings, on a group or a bus. But, you have that extra additive element of pushing your sound into the soft clip to create this color to give you a little bit more glue. I hope at this point we're all clear on that. So moving forward, I want to show you guys a way to take that Glue Compressor and amplify the loudness of any sound. Now, to fully understand this, we have to talk about RMS to peak relationship, because that's what we're going to be controlling. So if we look at this, I've got a kick and a snap. Okay, so I can go back over here and I could just write down like kick and snap. And if we look at these two sounds, if we listen to them individually, okay, you can see this is hitting at 0, and this is also hitting at 0. But which one of these sounds louder? Well, they should be the same volume, right? They're both peaking at 0. But that's not the way sound works. Every sound has got two things that make up the sound. You've got the peak, which is the highest part of the sound, and then you've got the RMS, which is the overall loudness of the sound. And that's represented here in Ableton by the light green being, like the hot light green being the RMS, and the faded green in the background being the peak. Let's take a look at the snap again. If you look here, you could see that there is a high peak but low RMS value to this sound. And if we look at this, the kick again, well, look at that. It's almost exactly the same, the RMS and the peak. So in that sense, the kick will always be louder than the snap. What if you had two bass sounds next to each other, and one had a higher, and they were both peaking at 0, you gain staged them both to 0, but one had a higher RMS than the other, and you're wondering to yourself, why does one of my sounds sound louder than the other one? And that's because of the RMS to peak relationship. Let's see if we could influence this to our advantage. So one of the best things to use to figure this out is going to be a snap, because it has a very, as we just saw, a very high peak but a very low RMS. And it makes sense if you think about a snap, it's all peak. There's not much to the sound after it. So what, can I never get that loud in a mix? No, there's things that we could do to make the perceived loudness come up. And that's really what we're doing here. Because like I said, the peaks are the same, but to our ears, we perceive the sound with higher RMS to be louder. So maybe we could alter our sound. So one thing I found, and I'm going to exaggerate this right now just to prove a point. You can choose how much to take advantage of this in your mix. So what we're going to do is I made these two little guys here, kind of just a group and a utility. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command K. I'm going to go into key command mode, and I'm going to just put Q on here and Q on here. And I picked Q just because it's a blank key, not for any other reason. And if I go and turn one of these off, well, just by hitting Q now, I could toggle between the two. This is good for referencing things with one click. And then the next thing we're going to do is move this utility to the other side. Oops, to the other side. And I want to do a little bit of referencing now and check our perceived loudness. Okay, so let's go ahead and see again. There we go. We could hear that, hitting it basically 0, and, we've got the sound that we've got. If I just throw this guy all the way up, I'm going to be peaking a little bit, but that's what this guy is here for. I want to bring it down so we're not peaking. And this is essentially the same as we had it before. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to go back and forth. So literally, this is the same volume, okay? Like literally. This right here is 0.2, okay? And if I hit Q, now this is 0.7, all right? Basically, we're in that 0 bracket of being normalized or gain stage to 0. But which one sounds louder? Obviously, I mean, it's incredible which one sounds more loud. And it doesn't sound overcompressed, it doesn't sound squashed, it just has more presence. Now, did I exaggerate this a bunch? Absolutely. But this is a tool now that I've showed you to compare a couple of sounds next to each other. And if you're like, oh, this one, because sure, the difference between, a kick and a snap is drastic, but when you have two bass sounds next to each other or two whatever sounds next to each other and the RMS is off a little bit, well, you could use this to just push into the soft clip, and it's going to create that very pleasing saturated sound that we've already known, we've already double checked on, and it's also going to raise our RMS. So one thing to pay attention to is make sure you got your attack and your release fully, well, this one fully open and this one fully closed. That way we're not really messing with the transients too much. And finally, I want you to make sure that you right click on your glue compressor and turn your oversampling on if you're going to be pushing into that soft clip. It just makes it better, more pleasing. Cool. So let's talk about the concept of this real fast. Why is this important? Well, I want you to think of your mix as a 2-gallon bucket of water. And obviously, you can't put more than 2 gallons of water in a 2-gallon bucket. It'll overflow. Same thing with our digital music. We can't get digital distortion. If you go past 0 and you clip, it just sounds really, really bad. So we need to think of ways to put more in our mix and take up less space. Think of it this way. If you're going on vacation and you have to pack a suitcase, if you just bundled up your clothes and stuffed it in there, you wouldn't really get much packed in the bag. But if you fold it up neatly and maybe do like a vacuum seal on it or something, you're going to really squash down each individual item and you'll be able to put more into your bag, your luggage, whatever, Same thing with this. If you could really control your RMS to peak value, then you're really taking advantage of what the listener can hear and what they hear the loudest, making these higher RMS sounds much louder and much more present. So a practical example of how I might use this would be like if I had this, if I had these kind of mid-bass sounds here that sound like this. Okay, so that's great, but I want them to stand out a little more, but not take up any more room in the mix. So if I tab over, I can see that I'm hitting at 12.25. And I can also see, well, in a second when I show you, that my RMS will have a little bit of room to come up to meet my peak. All the sounds are pretty even, but they're all missing a little bit of energy. So if I push this up into here, right, I'm going to probably peak a little bit over my 12.2, but I could pull it down. Oh, I'm a dB over, let's pull it down. There we go, now we got the same volume, but check this out. This here is a much higher RMS, making, not much higher, it's about a dB or two higher, but it's definitely pushing that sound further into your face. Let's check out what this sounds like. And now you can see how the RMS has been brought up, but the peak stays the same. This is great. This is like getting something for nothing. We're gaining a dB or two of perceived loudness to our listener's ear, but we're not taking up any more room in the mix at all. Kind of like magic. So let's recap. How do I get a loud mix? I think it's controlling your peak to RMS levels. Getting something for nothing, meaning increasing your RMS level will not necessarily increase your peak. In fact, if you push into the soft clip, it won't increase your peak and push your RMS up into it. This gives the listener a louder perceived volume, okay? The sound isn't actually any louder than it was, but to our listener's ear, it does seem louder. Technically, it is louder because we're increasing the RMS, but if we're looking at that peak volume that your meters are looking at, it's not gaining any more peak. So as far as Ableton's concerned or your DAW is concerned, you're not getting any more volume out of this. Remember, if you're not using Ableton, you could use Cytomic's The Glue, and it's the same kind of thing. It's in fact what the Glue Compressor was modeled after. I want you guys to go ahead and experiment with that for a little bit. There is one more device that we could use to do a very similar thing. For example, I wouldn't use this method on hi-hats or cymbals or something like that because it's going to put too much saturation on an already metallic sound, and it's going to sound very harsh. So there is one more device that I'll let you guys in on next time. So just to be clear, people might be like, oh, isn't this just like going into a limiter? And no, not really. Sort of, but not really, because a limiter is like a brick wall. If you hit that limiter, your sound will kind of crunch underneath of it. This is a soft clipping situation. And in the soft clipping situation, you know, I want you to think of it more of like, you know, it has a little bit of give to it. You aren't quite pushing into that digital distortion that we talked about being very bad, but you're not actually smashing your sound into a wall either. This is a more musical way of raising the RMS, in my opinion. Remember, guys, if you found this helpful or useful in any way, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the little bell down there, the alarm button, and you'll get notified every time I have a new video. I'm here to help you guys, but if you hit that subscribe and like button, you're helping me help you. All right, see you next time, guys.